These days, the minute you open TikTok or Instagram, odds are the first or second thing you see sounds a little something like this. Here's what I eat in a day as a health girly with a big girl job. Here are 10 foods I would never eat as a registered personal trainer. I'm a vague doctor of some sort, and here are things you need to get out of your house. Are you tired and suffering from back pain? Hi, I'm a 24-year-old in a luxury high-rise, and this is why you have a parasite. Hey everybody, our food is full of microplastics. Buy this special bracelet from my company that balances your body's ions and kills the microplastics. It's only $69.99 a month. Buy my course, buy my pills, buy my crystals.
Your life depends on it.
Well, that's a particular beast born of social media, but it's also not a new one at all. Before TikTok, health paranoia was often funneled through mail order scams or sensational books promoted on Talk TV. And before that, in the Victorian era, health advice and sometimes scams were as popular as ever, published by the hundreds and thousands in extremely successful health and lifestyle manuals and articles. Some of this advice was surprisingly good. Others are completely wacko, and just like today, they were largely aimed at women. Come learn with me. But first, while working on this video, I was increasingly grateful that today we have plenty of good resources to more easily access support and tools for genuinely improving our health. And today's sponsor, Trainwell, has helped me so much with my own health goals. Trainwell is a one-on-one remote personal training service, so you can accomplish your health and workout goals from literally anywhere with real human accountability and personalization all right in the app. No fads, no unrealistic promises, just working directly with a trainer to understand and accomplish your specific goals. My trainer, Jill, has been so supportive and helpful. During our kickoff call, she went over my goals in great detail, and I explained my convoluted health history. I'm chronically ill and disabled, and I just had a major surgery and a random health setback, so I had been out of the gym for a few months and wanted to get back on track in a way that suited me and my own shifting needs. This was a huge source of anxiety for me. I've had trainers in the past who pushed me way too hard, too fast, but Jill immediately understood what I needed and explained that Trainwell allows you to choose a backup plan B or C depending on how you feel that day. So if I wake up feeling like hot garbage, I can choose a workout that focuses on stretches instead, for example, and I still get that movement in, and on better days I get to hop back into my strength training, rebuilding my muscles and getting buff. It's genuinely helped me so much and helped me to know what I can be doing and how, rather than choosing a one-size-fits-all workout and hoping for the best. Having that personal support every day and check-ins has helped to motivate me too, even when it's really hard. Take your health by the reins and take the Trainwell quiz to find your perfect trainer and get 14 days of free training here at my link in the description below. Thank you so much to Trainwell for sponsoring this video, and now let's get back to learning about Victorian health manuals. The Victorians were deeply concerned about most things, but one of their biggest concerns was the seemingly rampant issue of madness and insanity, something which had a very, very vague definition and diagnosis for as long as anyone could remember. Anything from general nervousness to actual severe psychotic disorders could be shoved under a similar umbrella and often treated with the same detrimental severity and horrible cruelty. The Georgian era especially saw a huge amount of abuse towards psychiatric patients who were kept in asylums that were more akin to prisons. By the time Queen Victoria took the throne, it was an issue that rested heavily on people's minds as the lumbering roar of the Industrial Revolution came crashing through people's lives, bringing with it a sudden and immense change never before conceived. People were suddenly thrust into a world of machines, trains, automata, and coal-powered industry, and so followed a deep plague of unsettling anxiety about society, the future, and how life could even function. As nervous disorders became more visible and common, people started to understand the urgency of reforming how we treat and think about people who need psychiatric and physical help, leading to the gargantuan task of constructing new, reformed asylums and sanitariums. The most common victims who could benefit from these reforms were women, who frequently were diagnosed with nervousness, moral insanity, and hysteria as a result of, like, having a uterus or whatever. Elaine Showalter writes in The Female Malady, "It is notable that the domestication of insanity and its assimilation by the Victorian institution coincide with its feminization. Gradually, the percentages of women in Victorian asylums increased after the passage of the Lunatics Act, and by the 1850s, there were more women than men in public institutions. This was in part actually due to the fact that women were more likely to live in poverty, often when abandoned by husbands or left unmarried with children, and impoverished people often ended up in asylums not just due to possible psychiatric struggles, but also due to the physical maladies associated with poverty: senility, malnutrition, consumption, physical disabilities, etc. And these physical issues were certainly more common to the impoverished population, but they weren't limited to it. Modernity also brought new concerns about the increase in physical illness found in smoky, disease-ridden cities in this era before proper food and drug regulation, when your bread could be filled with sawdust, and your grandpa could fill his morphine addiction at the local druggist with no doctor supervision whatsoever. Health and the lack of it was rapidly becoming an obsession which demanded answers, and where there are desperate people, there's money to be made. And where there's money, there are experts ready to exploit. So came the rise of general health and advice manuals and articles written by anyone from actual doctors to etiquette experts. These books, a few of which I own, vary widely in their content. Some are more focused on improving one's life via philosophy or mindset, and others are more medical in nature, and still others are directed very pointedly towards a specific audience. Most often, this audience was middle-class women. These women faced very specific expectations on how to live their lives, following the ideal of the angel of the home as glorified by Victorian society. Women must be physically flawless, charming and beautiful, healthy, good-natured, as well as perfect mothers, always ready to perform highly specific social rituals and expectations. Outside of actual advice manuals, every issue of women's periodicals had at least one article going over advice for health and beauty, and women were forced into a complex paradox where they were advertised cosmetics and beauty tools, but of course you must never use them, because if you need to fix imperfections, then that means the imperfections exist, and really you ought not to have those in the first place, right? There was a not uncommon idea that people with traits deemed ugly were morally impure, and beautiful people were not. And if you were wearing makeup, you're obviously trying to hide your true character, like some sort of harlot. Lola Montez wrote in her 1858 book, The Arts of Beauty, or Secrets of a Lady's Toilet, "What expression can there be in a face bedaubed with white paint and enameled? No flush of pleasure, no thrill of hope, no light of love can shine through the encrusted mold." So as a result, you get a huge variety of attitudes as well as a lot of contradictions, sometimes in the same book. For example, as Polina Shvanyukova points out in her study of a number of etiquette manuals, many of them say that women are, quote, great talkers naturally, and are great at conversation, but then it goes on to simultaneously say that women need to be taught how to converse. Like, okay, is it natural or not then? Even a woman's voice must be seemingly naturally perfect. Quote, melodious and well-regulated, gentle and low. A too low voice is sulky, sullen, and obstinate, but a too high voice is petulant, pert, and impatient. Of course, men never get these sorts of criticisms, much in the way that today vocal fry is a maligned trait in women, but wholly ignored and even praised when men have it. You also must never seem too smart. You'll scare away a rich husband. 1859's Advice to Young Ladies writes, "Do not make a parade of your learning if you have any. A little learning is a dangerous thing, and few women have more than a little. If you are really well informed, you may choose subjects which may instruct in conversation, but men in particular have a dislike to women who seem too sensible of their literary acquirements." Of course, when forbidden from discussing serious topics, many women would gossip or talk about social topics instead, but look out! That's not allowed either. No one likes a gossipy woman. So in the end, best to only open your mouth if you're agreeing with a man, I guess. Some of these manuals got so specific in their instructions that they become cartoonish. 1847's Instructions in Etiquette writes, "If the whole of the company be standing, and you are addressed by anyone in particular, you must immediately direct your whole attention to him only. Your body perfectly upright, but not stiff, a little turned to the right or left, with the face completely towards him, looking a little over one shoulder, the arms across the waist, the upper hand open, or the hands clasped and hanging down in front, one foot advanced a little, the body resting upon that foot which is behind. If the person who speaks to you is giving any directions, every time you think it necessary to assent, incline the body and head gracefully forward. Should the individual present anything, you keep the body bent until you have received it, and then, when you leave him, slide smoothly away, sinking at the same time." Etiquette is in part intrinsically connected to the trend of hygienic utopianism, as James Wharton called it. The various reform movements railing against types of social vice believed that health issues and social ills were all interconnected and could be spiritually solved with healthy practices. The healthier the populace, the more lawful society will be, which is not necessarily untrue. Of course, the American Civil War and a number of epidemics really put a damper on the optimism associated with these movements, and the advice for healthfulness started getting more and more divorced from spiritual purity, and in general, people were very, very interested in learning more about physical health, hygiene, and how they could essentially be their own physicians in an era when hospitals were still rife with grime and disease, a place you only went often if your life depended on it. You did not want to end up in a hospital, so it was in people's best interest to stay healthy and at home. By the 1870s, things had improved on the hospital front a little bit, and health manuals shifted away from being extremely clinical with first aid guides to being more general and hygiene and physical education based. This was a trend about 100 years in the making. I mean, medical textbooks and guides had existed for as long as the written word. Around 1769, William Buchan published Domestic Medicine, which is usually regarded as the turning point where these clinical books intended for professionals began to shift more towards longevity guides made for the layman, and more often, housewives. So as the 19th century crawled onwards, women were increasingly marketed these books discussing household management in combination with beauty, child rearing, physical health, and more, typically authored by doctors. Still others made no attempt to include medical advice, and these were written by relatable lifestyle gurus. And women clamored for these books in part due to the increasing stress placed on them to be socially absolutely perfect. Dara Rossman-Regagnon writes in Anxious Uptake's 19th Century Advice Literature as a Rhetorical Genre, motherhood began to be significantly sentimentalized in the middle of the 18th century. At that time, motherhood, rather than marriage, began to be seen as the central experience of a woman's life. With the rise of the middle class and the increased centrality of family enterprise, motherhood came to be venerated less as the biological bringing forth of children, and more as the ongoing activity of caring for and educating them. As a result, mothering became increasingly understood as a specialized practice. I should note, some of these manuals were actually pretty progressive-minded for their time, even in regards to women's sexual health. The 1846 Manual Professional Records, The Institutes of Marriage, Its Intent, Obligations, and Physical and Constitutional Disqualifications by R.J. Culverwell actually went so far as to lecture about the importance of both man and wife experiencing, an O. Generally, he wrote that a wife may still be considered modest and proper if she experiences pleasure too. And doggone it, brother, you gotta give your wife the old razzle-dazzle at minimum 3 to 4 times a week, he says. Anyway, these types of manuals really weren't as common, especially after the 1840s, but it still makes me happy to know that they were floating around and were pretty popular. I suppose it makes sense that manual authors would want to encourage reciprocity in marital relations, especially due to the fact that masturbation was generally believed to cause insanity and death. Books ran rampant with tales of men who died of self-abuse and the body and soul destroyer, and often men and women who had a tendency to perform such unnatural acts were sent to for-profit asylum-style clinics run by quack doctors serving up all manner of patent medicines. Manuals would scare people into good behavior by regaling tales of people, especially children and teens, who were once bright, happy, and obedient, and after falling victim to the unnatural acts, became irritable, reticent, and fretful, now antisocial and strangulated by guilt. Hell, it could even cause physical damage, impotence, consumption, weakness of the legs. Some books even claimed it could make your dick fall off, or your uterus fall out. They sometimes recommended a restricted diet of water, porridge, milk, toast, and mutton to control those nasty instincts. Some of the books directed at men were just like really diabolical. Some of these passages, like this one from 1859's Love by M.J. Michelet writes, "Woman does nothing as we do. She thinks, speaks, and acts differently. Her tastes are different from our tastes. Her blood does not flow in her veins as ours does. At times it rushes through them like a foaming mountain torrent. She does not respire as we do, making provision for pregnancy and the future ascension of the lower organs. Nature has so constructed her that she breathes, for the most part, by the 4 upper ribs. She does not eat like us, neither as much nor of the same dishes. Why? Chiefly because she does not digest as we do. Her digestion is every moment troubled by one thing. She yearns with her very bowels. The deep cup of love, which is called the pelvis, is a sea of varying emotions, hindering the regularity of the nutritive functions." Some of these books also say that reading novels can cause young girls to develop prematurely, because they're like too excited or something. At the same time, other manuals were way more forward-thinking, sometimes in the same book as some more bonkers backwards ideas. Some books, such as Orson Fowler's Creative and Sexual Science or John Cohen's The Science of a New Life, actually advocated for women's suffrage, women's education, women's right to own property, and their right to equal pay and employment. They also encouraged women to stay away from suitors who drank and smoked too much, and reminded them that the most important factor in matrimony is to actually love and be friends with your partner. So, yeah, it was sometimes a mixed bag with actual gems sprinkled in, or sometimes it was just total dog shit. Luckily, as far as mixed bags goes, I personally own 2 examples. So the 2 manuals I own are drastically different styles. We have 1897's The Lady's Home Manual of Culture and Beauty, and 1878's The Royal Path of Life, both published here in Chicago, coincidentally. I mean, a lot of books were, but you know. So first off, the Lady's Home Manual authors, Monfort B. Allen and Amelia C. McGregor. Both of these 2 seem to have been consistent authors of ladies' health manuals. They also worked with each other on The Glory of Woman, Girlhood to Motherhood, and The Woman Beautiful. This was a fairly common thing for manual authors to just keep pumping them out, and often they'd become household names. In this case, both Monfort Allen and Amelia McGregor were licensed doctors, which already puts them in an interesting new category above a lot of the others, considering the fact that one of them is a woman doctor. Not only do they have advice for young women, they have credentials to back it up outside of just having some really strong etiquette opinions. The Royal Path of Life was published in 1878 by Thomas Louis Haynes and Levi W. Yagi, who also wrote the Our Home Counselor Manual. Haynes was largely a historian and Yagi was a biographer, so neither of these guys was a doctor or a lifestyle expert, hence why this book takes a more sociological and philosophical approach. So nothing extremely of note here. It's actually pretty well balanced and gives some pretty good advice for generally how to be a good person, especially in the society it was written in. A lot may not apply to today, but that's because we don't live in 1878. This thing covers basically every single topic you can imagine. Life, man and woman, mother, children, youth, home, family worship, home influence, home amusements, to young men, to young women, daughter and sister, associates, influence, habit, company, force of character, integrity, poor boys and eminence, occupation, employment, true greatness, idleness, education, opportunity, spare moments, books, reading, perseverance, pluck, self-reliance, labor, energy, luck and pluck, purpose and will, courage, little things, economy, farm life, success, industry, honesty, character, principle and right, value of reputation, fame, ambition, avarice, gambling, temper, anger, obstinacy, hypocrisy, fretting and grumbling, fault-finding, envy, slander, vanity, pride, fops and dandies, fashion, dress, church dress, manners, the true gentleman, wit, truth, judgment, patience, contentment, cheerfulness, happiness, gratitude, hope, charity, kindness, friendship, courtship, flirting, bachelors, influence of matrimony, advantage of matrimony, young men in matrimony, young ladies in matrimony, love, marriage, the conjugal relation, husband and wife, joy, beauty, music, honor, genius and talent, thinkers, benefactors or malefactors, trials of life, sickness, tears, sorrow, sorrowing for the dead, adversity, debt, failure, despair, stepping stones, prayer, there is a God, the Bible, religion, immortality, doing good, well-doing, old age, and death. Every single one of those individually was a chapter. So obviously all of this is like a mindset manual. It gives advice on the way to go about your life in all situations, the way you should think about things, but that's not what we're here to rank. That is the Ladies' Home Manual. Okay, so the Ladies' Home Manual is a pretty mixed bag. When I first got it and was reading through it, I was really surprised because it was so open and honest about real truths about anatomy and women's health, explaining things like menstruation and pregnancy in great detail. I don't want to have my computer on my lap, so what I'm gonna do is go through it and rank it, and then I'm gonna like put on screen the ranking after the fact. Every girl should be independent. Every young lady, whether she be rich or poor, especially if she anticipates marriage, should be as familiar with the necessary duties of the family as she is with the keys of her piano, and much more than the fashionable acquirements of the day, for none can fill the sphere of companion and parent until they are intimate with household labors, are capable of arranging family matters, and supplying their own wants, particularly in the line of making garments, preparing food, etc. So obviously this advice kind of hinges on like what women's work is, but it's still, I think, is good advice. Every girl should be independent. It also in the same section goes on to complain about men who are not very independent and that they can't perform some domestic duties. So I think this one is pretty good. I'm gonna put it in A tier. This piece of advice comes from Chapter 2, Advice to the Unmarried. Do not marry, then, in any case, to avoid importunities and puerilities, or to save the tears and feelings of others, as selfishness, if it can be so called, rather self-love, is justifiable in this case. Never marry to get rid of the stigma of being called an old maid or an old bachelor. It is an honor and a credit to many that they have had prudence and a sense of duty sufficient to control their feelings, and to enable them to remain single. Also, some very good advice, again, because yeah, you shouldn't be getting married just out of a social pressure. You should be getting married because you want to. There was a lot of stigma around being a spinster or an old maid, but the reality is a lot of people who remain spinsters or old maids ended up much happier than some married women did. Same goes to the old bachelors. So big fan of that. That's an S tier for sure. And then at the very tail end of this chapter, coquettes and flatterers. Do not marry a coquette or a flatterer. A coquette has no heart, and a flatterer but a hollow and deceptive one. Do not trifle with your affections by keeping company as a matter of curiosity or opposition. Now this one, I can see where it's coming from. Like, it can probably be assumed that a coquette and a flatterer wouldn't be like serious about the responsibilities that being married entails. But I will say, who's to say that the coquette and the flatterer isn't also gonna be like a really good married partner? So I'm putting that in C tier, because it's not like terrible, but also I feel like there's room for nuance. If you are very poor, do not marry a person very wealthy, merely on account of his or her wealth, unless you wish to act the part of a servant, and to live with the continued reflection that you are eating another's bread and riding in another's carriage. If you have insane or consumptive tendencies of body, do not marry one who has the same, unless you wish to bring upon yourself, your family, and posterity all of the evils of hereditary disease. Now, these two are also, I think, lacking nuance, because like, that's not fair to say that people who struggle with mental illness shouldn't get married to other people struggling with mental illness. Like, it really is a your mileage may vary situation, and as long as you're handling it correctly, who's to say what you can and can't do? Come on. But then the like class difference marriage thing, I can see where this would have been a very relevant piece of advice in the Victorian era, Now, though, I don't think it actually applies, so I'm putting this in D tier. The sin of transmitting disease. Those persons who are aware of being under the influence of a constitutional tendency to any disease have a moral law within themselves why they should not enter into a matrimonial alliance. Look at some of our families. The disease of insanity, idiocy, consumption, scrofula, and a host of others have become incorporated with them. Regular heirlooms transmitted from father to son and mother to daughter with far greater regularity and certainty than relics or property of any kind. I feel like this kind of is in the same category as the last one. Like, just because someone has some kind of like mental illness doesn't mean they can't have children. But again, I can see why this might have been a concern back then more so than it is today. The concept of idiocy being a disease. Language has really changed so much, hasn't it? The opinion prevails almost universally that married life necessarily diminishes female beauty. Hence, the female invalid ceases to throw that interest, animation, expressiveness, soul into her looks, action, conversation, etc., which health would enable her to put forth and impart, while disease, by rendering her looks more or less haggard and ghastly, and her intonation sorrowful and hackled, makes that repulsive which health would render charming. So, judging women for not being pretty enough after they get married because they're not seeking a man now, they're already spoken for, and then also women with poor health being ghastly to look at, wow. F tier. Lowest tier possible. Come on. It is manly for a man to love his wife. He was created a man expressly for this. Then is it not as manly to express his love, and equally feminine in her to both tenderly love her husband and manifest her outgushing tenderness? Is love loathsome that it must be stifled? It is the purest of emotions. Only when it is perverted is it indelicate. And if husbands and wives would but manifest more love and purity, they would experience far less of its animal aspect. Okay, we have a complicated one here. So, the animal side of love, or the carnal side, I suppose, is not okay. You should not be a poivert, but it is very good to be romantic. Like, there's multiple sides to this. Because, like, on the one hand, it's very good to be telling men that it's not unmanly to show love to their wife. But on the other hand, there's nothing wrong with being a little bit of a poivert when you're married to somebody, okay? Like, I'm putting this in B tier, I think. During the monthly periods, violent exercise is injurious. Iced drinks and acid beverages are improper, and bathing in the sea and bathing the feet in cold water and cold baths are dangerous. And indeed, at such times as these, no risks should be run, no experiments should, for one moment, be permitted. Otherwise, serious consequences will, in all probability, ensue. The monthly periods are times not to be trifled with, or woe betide the unfortunate trifler. I mean, obviously, most people, when they're on their period, don't feel like doing much, probably because you're in pain and tired and just feel like dog shit generally. But also, physical movement does help with cramps, we know that. And I don't know if cold water or bathing in the sea actually has any real effect, but it seems like bullshit to me. Maybe it's that, like, the cold would stifle blood flow through the body is where their logic is coming from. I'm gonna put this one in C tier, because no. The limitation of the number of children is advocated as a right and a duty by a class of social reformers who, at the same time, insist upon the right and even duty of frequent gratification of the amative propensities by all persons who have arrived at the age of puberty. Virtue, chastity, continence, they denounce as unnatural and mischievous. We hold, on the contrary, that the law of a pure and unperverted nature is the law of chastity, and that it is consistent with the highest health and the best bodily, mental, moral condition of men and women. So it's the trend with this book so far is both educating people about, like, sex ed and pregnancy, but at the same time being like, don't have sex. Don't have sex ever. Stop that. Basically, they're saying unless you're having sex within your marriage to create children, and even then you shouldn't be making much of those, just stay away from each other altogether. This marriage is a hands-off situation. I'm putting that in D tier. It just doesn't hold up. A young wife in her first pregnancy usually takes 2 long walks. This is a common cause of flooding, miscarriage, and of bearing down of the womb. So basically saying that as soon as you're pregnant, stop fucking moving because you're gonna have a miscarriage. So that's not true. F tier, because it straight up just isn't true. So now we've reached a section that's giving like advice for baby food, like infant diets. Sometimes the two milks, the mother's and the cow's milk, do not agree. When such is the case, let the milk be left out, both in this and in the foods following, and let the food be made with water, instead of with milk and water. In other respects, until the child is weaned, let it be made as above directed. When he is weaned, good fresh cow's milk must, as previously recommended, be used. Or cut thin slices of bread into a basin, cover the bread with cold water, place it in an oven for 2 hours to bake, take it out, beat the bread up with a fork, and then lightly sweeten it. This is an excellent food. I don't think that's an excellent food. Probably. Now listen, I've never had kids, and I'm never going to have kids. So am I like an expert in raising a child and like what baby's got going on? No, but even I can tell that that's probably not an awesome thing to be feeding your baby. Will it kill the baby though? I mean, probably not, right? I'm putting that in D tier. The chapter on how to prevent disease, this should be interesting. Smart children are not always the healthiest. A greater quantity of arterial blood is sent to the brain of those who are prematurely talented, and hence it becomes more ordinarily developed. Such advantages are not unmixed with danger. This same arterial blood may excite and feed inflammation, and either convulsions, or water on the brain, or insanity, or at least idiocy may follow. How proud a mother is in having a precocious child, how little she is aware that precocity is frequently an indication of disease. So that's also just not true. If you have a smart child, your child is not like more prone to being sick. That's just not true. F tier. Hard red pimples, known as the grub pimple, are a common and an obstinate affection of the skin, affecting the forehead, the temples, the nose, the chin, and the cheeks, occasionally attacking the neck, the shoulders, the back, and the chest. These pimples are so well known by most persons as scarcely they need description. We find in these cases great benefit to be derived from bathing the face night and morning with strong salt and water. Sea bathing in these cases is very beneficial. I mean, I guess I can see how that would probably help, like drying it out. B tier, I guess. Probably not awesome for your skin, but not like terrible either. Beautiful skin and complexion, things worth remembering. Lemonade, made by squeezing the juice of a lemon into a half-pint tumbler full of water and sweetening it with a little sugar, should be frequently and liberally taken, as one of the best beverages in such cases. So I guess what they're saying is lemonade is good for keeping your skin healthy. I've never heard such a thing, but I will take any excuse to drink lemonade. It is a delightful beverage, they're not wrong about that. A tier, because like, no, but also yes. Electricity and other remedies for hair restoration. It will be thus seen that the principle generally adopted by both the professional man and the quack in the treatment of loss of the hair and baldness is essentially that of stimulation or excitation of the scalp. The celebrated Reverend John Wesley acted on it in his recommendation to rub the part morning and evening with a raw onion until it becomes red, and then apply a little honey. This is certainly good advice, as independent of the stimulus thus given to the skin and the circulation, the surface of the scalp is rendered more absorbent and more sensitive to the action of medicaments. Okay, so bald men, rub your bald head with an onion really vigorously, and then put honey on it. I have to say, I don't think so. F tier. Okay, so you knew this was coming, right? There's some racism in here. Genuinely unfucking prompted. We already know this is gonna be an F tier, but here's an example. A lofty, ample forehead is the attribute of the enlightened white race. A receding forehead, that of the N-word. Beyond a certain limit, reason disappears and idiocy commences. The absence of a true forehead is one of the characteristics of the brute creation. Its excellence is an important ingredient in personal beauty and is absolutely necessary to the possession of the superior mind. Okay. Their logic here implying that how far your hairline recedes indicates your intelligence. Brilliancy of the eyes. I was really excited to see this one because my friend Abby made an amazing video about using belladonna as like a cosmetic. Please watch her video, it's really good. But here's an example of it being mentioned in a book. It has also been asserted, and we believe correctly, that certain ladies of the demi-monde rub a very small quantity of belladonna ointment on the brow over each eye, or moisten the same part with a few drops of tincture of belladonna. This produces a dilation of the pupil and gives a peculiar fullness and an expression of languor to the eyes, which by some are regarded as exceedingly fascinating. Yeah, so I won't get too much into this. Abby's entire video is about it. Clearly the myth of this happening persisted into books like these because they're like, well, we heard about it. Can't say for sure if it does that, but we heard about it. So C tier, I guess. Deportment and manners. What belongs to the toilet should never be done in public. One may repair an accident, put up a stray ringlet, arrange a shawl, tie a string. But one may not comb the hair, clean the nails, or touch the nose or ears. It is not delicate to scratch oneself. Only under the most urgent necessity can one blow her nose in company. It may be wiped, not blown, if it can be avoided, especially at the table. I actually agree with most of this. I am one of those people where if you're blowing your nose around other people, or like especially at the table where there's food, just go run into oncoming traffic. I'm so serious. That is so gross. Like, go to the bathroom, excuse yourself, walk away, go do anything. But just like, why would you do that around people? It's so gross. It's so gross. I'm like getting heated and stressed just thinking about it. S tier advice. Try to free yourself from all annoying habits. Do not make disagreeable noises, nor any noises that can be avoided in eating or drinking. Never hum or whistle unless quite alone. To do either in company may be very disagreeable. Beware of sniffing or any unpleasant sound of the nose or mouth or breathing. Sleep with your mouth closed so as never to snore. So resolutely guard your life from any impropriety that you cannot even dream of one. Okay, so also to an extent I agree with this. I feel like if you're like, you know those dudes that like walk around, they go like clear their throat in the loudest manner possible, or they sneeze and like scream sneeze in public just because they can. Like, I think that's really annoying. You should be mindful of other people, but also this is taking it way too far. Come on, like sometimes people can't help it. Let's all be chill, be friends, peace and love on planet Earth. C tier. How to escape a bore. Not like a B-O-A-R, B-O-R-E. It's very different situations. If a man is tiresome, or becomes so by talking too much, the best way to escape is by a compliment. Thank him for the pleasure he has given, and do not deprive others of the benefit of listening to his instructive remarks. We are not to be insincere, for everybody is instructive, though too much of some kinds of instruction may become monotonous. But a man of tact will be able at any time to give a new turn to conversation, and adroitly throw it to the hands of a more entertaining colloquist. I mean, that's not bad advice, especially when you're dealing with like a mansplainer. Like, people don't like to be called out. There's a way to lead the conversation in a way that doesn't hurt anyone's feelings, but also, like, especially if they're not doing it with, like, malice. B tier. Ooh, subjects not to be mentioned. One should never speak of disease or medicine or anything connected with either. If one speaks of a voyage, he must omit the interesting fact of having been seasick. There may be no harm in saying, I had a glorious douche this morning, but the discussion that might arise is to be avoided. Generally, nothing must ever be said at the table which could directly or indirectly excite disgust. I mean, I can't agree with this because me and my friends are always talking about our health issues, so D tier. Not offensive, but I don't agree with you. I guess it depends what company you're with. A mark of bad breeding. Those with bad breeding talk and chatter and simper to the intense disgust and annoyance of the really discriminating and intelligent portion of the audience. Well-bred persons pay more respect to the rights and feelings of their neighbors than to indulge their own selfishness in that matter. The cracking and eating of nuts, the rustling of fans, programs, and dresses are all exhibitions of thoughtless rudeness and are unbecoming in a place devoted to literary or musical culture. So this is specifically referencing like an audience at a concert, and I completely agree. Audience culture at concerts in recent years has been so bad. Like a few years ago, I went to see Florence and the Machine at the Hollywood Bowl, And I have to say, worst audience I've ever been in. People FaceTiming with people during the concert, having full conversations, like walking up and down the aisles, passing out drugs to each other, making out right next to people. Like, Jesus Christ, what is wrong with you? And like in movies too, people like fully on their phone with the brightness all the way up during a movie and like talking and like throwing stuff. Get it together. S tier. And lastly, in the rules of etiquette section, do not simper. If there is anything to enjoy that is worthy of a laugh, laugh heartily. But remember that uproarious, boisterous mirth is exceedingly vulgar. The ruder the people are, the louder and coarser will be their expressions of enjoyment. So basically just like, you're not allowed to laugh too much. You're not allowed to be too happy, no matter how much fun you're having. I don't like that. Express yourself. Love yourself. F tier. So there we have it. The Lady's Home Manual by two doctors with a lot of very strong opinions. I would say that these books being a little bit of a Russian roulette situation is actually not that different from our situation today. Nowadays, we most often don't get our health advice from manuals. We get it from social media. TikTok has a problem. One of the biggest topics on there is the mental health hashtag and health-related hashtags, which have hundreds of billions of views. And hi Mila. Sorry, she wanted to say hi. And running rampant in these popular tags are videos that spread misinformation about vaccines, cancer, alternative medicine, autism, ADHD, medical conspiracy theories, and other extremely delicate topics. The TikTok user base is not primed to expect that the person behind the camera has done any due diligence to research or that they're an actual expert. What's more important is how relatable the speaker is, or if they have the thin veneer of expertise. Basically, how confident do you sound when you speak? And many of these videos are either sponsored by various companies or groups, or are promoting a product without disclosing that there's money involved. And it's hard to say exactly how deep and extensive this problem is due to the sheer magnitude, not just on TikTok, but on Instagram Reels too. In a study published this year through the University of Sydney, researchers found that in the nutrition content sphere on TikTok, 82% of the analyzed posts lacked transparent advertising, 77% didn't disclose conflicts of interest, 55% didn't provide evidence-based information, 75% were not balanced or even accurate, and 90% did not disclose the risks versus the benefits of their advice. 36% of the posts were completely inaccurate, while only 18% were completely accurate. The rest were a mixed bag. This is partially fueled by TikTok's algorithm-driven emphasis on short-form content with punchy, flashy messages. Videos that contain too much detail that's hard to understand or has confusing language doesn't perform well, not to mention the fact that most experts who actually know what they're talking about aren't making TikToks all day, they're off their phones doing their jobs. So you're left with an overwhelming number of layman creators posing as experts or educators, giving health advice to a massive population of people who are addicted to TikTok and have attention spans absolutely obliterated by short-form videos and ChatGPT, primed to accept pretty much any advice if it feeds enough into the paranoia that you're learning secret info that doctors don't want you to know about. A 2024 study conducted through the University of Nebraska-Lincoln discovered that a majority of young women in the US have, intentionally or not, gained health information through TikTok. It states, age, education, and TikTok intensity, i.e. participants' emotional connectedness to TikTok and TikTok's integration into their daily lives, were positively correlated with overall credibility perceptions of the health information. Nearly the entire sample reported that they think that misinformation is prevalent on TikTok, but a third-person effect was found because the young women reported that they believe that other people are more susceptible to health misinformation of TikTok than they personally are. Like, yeah, of course people fall for health lies on TikTok. Not me, though. Couldn't be me. Listen, I get it. I have personally spent my whole life struggling against medical malpractice. It happened to me twice this year alone. I have a permanent disability from being neglected by doctors. I understand the pain of being a patient in the US healthcare system, especially as things get increasingly politicized in medical spaces and, well, shit just flat out sucks. And doctors are overworked too. Every day I go online and I see hundreds of comments from people experiencing the same thing. Their suffering is ignored, insurance sucks, doctors don't take them seriously. I once paid an $80 copay and waited months to see a specialist, and when he walked into the room, he literally just said, "There's nothing wrong with you," and then didn't examine me at all. 2 months later, I was in the ER. So yeah, I get it, but that rando on TikTok with no training and no credentials is not the answer. And some of these people are genuinely scumbags looking to take advantage of frightened people to gain money or fame or to push an anti-science message that will genuinely hurt or kill people. It's like walking through a minefield because, yes, sometimes genuinely good advice filters through, and there have been some incredible success stories of people finding an elusive diagnosis through guidance they saw on TikTok. Basically, all I'm saying is be careful and be critical, especially now as people increasingly use ChatGPT for research and writing scripts. And as we know, ChatGPT is not a reliable narrator and often hallucinates information and resources, not to mention the fact that it is built to agree with the ideas you feed it. Advice manuals, articles, videos, and more are not always bad. They can often be extremely helpful. We've looked at a lot of the controversial and goofy ones today, but then some of them are surprisingly helpful. It just goes to show that as silly as the Victorian era was, it was also not a monolith, and there were experts out there doing their best to actually help people with the information they had at the time with the tools that they were provided. And of course, not everyone back then read these silly advice manuals and accepted them uncritically. We can all take what we're looking at with a grain of salt, think about where it's coming from, and take with us what actually helps. Thank you for learning with me about some wacky health advice and some that holds up better than I thought. I hope you enjoyed this journey, and I hope you had a great Halloween season. Don't forget to grab a copy of my graphic novel, Liberated: The Radical Art and Life of Claude Gahen. Don't forget to head to the link in the description below to get 14 days of free training with Trainwell. And until next time, wash thy hands, wear thy mask, and don't rub an onion on your scalp, please.